"Sir, I can make your daughter walk again," said the beggar boy. The millionaire turned and froze. The sun was pale above the city of Boston, barely filtering through the towering glass buildings that cast long shadows over the sidewalks. At the edge of Beacon Hill, where luxury met quiet dignity, a black car pulled up in front of one of the city's premier rehabilitation centers. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his jaw tense with restrained frustration. James Harrington was a name people knew. Tech investor, philanthropist, millionaire by 30. The kind of man whose handshake sealed seven-figure deals, whose presence at a fundraiser meant automatic headlines. But if one looked closely that morning, they would have seen a tiredness in his eyes, a hollowness that all the money in the world couldn't fill. Inside the vehicle, a soft voice whispered, "Are we here again, Daddy?" James turned, his features softening as he leaned in to help his daughter. Emily Harrington, age 9, sat in a custom wheelchair, her thin arms clutching a plush pink rabbit with worn-down ears. Her legs, once so quick to chase butterflies in the backyard or dance barefoot across marble floors, lay still under a white fleece blanket. "We're here, sweetheart," James said, forcing a smile. Maybe today's the day. He'd said it every time. And every time, it wasn't. As the nurse came to assist, James exhaled slowly and glanced up at the clinic's sign. Mason Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation. 3 months, twice a week, endless hours of therapy, machines, specialists, and not an inch of progress. He remembered the words the last doctor had whispered, almost apologetically. Sometimes the nerves just don't wake up. Today was no different. By noon, they were back at the car. Emily was quiet, gazing out the tinted window, watching the rain begin to mist across the pavement. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked suddenly. Voice barely audible. James froze. "What? No, of course not." "Then why won't my legs work?" she whispered, not looking at him. He opened his mouth, closed it, then reached out and held her hand. They didn't speak again until the car stopped at a traffic light. Just outside the hospital gates, near the iron fence, a boy stood barefoot on the curb, maybe 12 years old, skin the color of midnight, clothes torn at the sleeves and knees, a cardboard sign around his neck that simply read, "Need help." "God bless." James noticed the boy's posture, unmoving, statuesque, but dismissed him. Boston had its share of street kids, and this one looked no different from the rest. Still, something about the boy's eyes caught his attention, steady, alert, far too old for his age. As they waited for traffic to shift, the boy stepped closer. "Sir," the boy said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the hum of the idling engine. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." James turned sharply. For a moment, he thought he misheard, but the boy was staring straight at him, unblinking, expression solemn. "What did you just say?" James barked, stepping out of the car. The driver tried to pull him back, whispering something about not engaging, but James was already standing, towering over the boy. A nearby security guard began walking toward them, hand on his belt. "I said," the boy repeated, "I can help your daughter walk." James looked him up and down. Dirty feet, bandaged knuckles, a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big. A beggar, a nobody, and yet there was no fear in his eyes. "You think this is funny?" James snapped. "Some kind of joke? My daughter is paralyzed." "I know," the boy replied, "but she doesn't have to stay that way." The guard had arrived now. "Sir, do you want me to remove him?" he asked James, glancing at the boy with barely concealed contempt. "He's been hanging around here all week, bothering patients. We've warned him." James hesitated. The arrogance of it, this boy, daring to say such a thing, was infuriating. But what struck him more was the certainty in the boy's tone. Not a shred of hesitation. No hint of a scam or rehearsed line. Just belief. Emily had rolled down her window. She was looking at the boy now, her big eyes full of curiosity, not fear. "What's your name?" she called. "Micah," he said gently, offering her a small smile. "Hi, Emily. How do you know my name?" she asked. "I heard your dad say it when he helped you out of the car." Micah replied. James took a step forward. "All right, Micah, let's cut the act. Who put you up to this? What church? What GoFundMe scam? You expecting me to hand you $100 for a magic prayer?" Micah shook his head. "I don't want your money." I want to help. Help? James laughed. A bitter, tired laugh. Are you a doctor, Micah? A neurosurgeon in disguise? No, the boy said. But I know things. My mom taught me before she passed. She used to help people walk again too. People nobody else could help. James stared at him, unsure whether he was dealing with a liar, a lunatic, or something else entirely. The guard nudged the boy's shoulder. Move along, kid, now. Micah didn't flinch. Sir, he said again, his voice unwavering. Let me try. One session. If nothing happens, I'll leave. You'll never see me again. James almost said no, almost turned and walked away. But then Emily called softly. Please, Daddy, just for once, can we try something different? He turned and looked at her thin arms, her pale face, the way she held her stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. And for the first time in weeks, he saw something flicker in her eyes that hadn't been there for so long, hope. His chest tightened. Micah stood still, waiting. The rain had picked up now, dotting his hoodie with dark splotches. The city buzzed around them, horns, footsteps, chatter, but in that moment, time seemed to hold its breath. James ran a hand through his hair. He hated this, hated being desperate, hated that he was even considering the words of a barefoot kid who lived off scraps and kindness. But he hated the look in his daughter's eyes more, the look of someone who was starting to believe again. He let out a long, shaky breath. One session, he said, his voice low. That's all. Micah smiled, but not with triumph. It was the kind of smile you gave someone who finally stopped drowning long enough to breathe. Thank you, sir, he said. James didn't return the smile. He turned back to the car, waved off the guard, and opened the rear door. As Micah climbed in, the nurse's jaw dropped. James ignored her, because no matter how insane it felt, he had just made a deal with a boy who lived on the streets. A boy who claimed he could do what the finest doctors in Boston couldn't. A boy who, with 6 words, had managed to crack the walls James had spent months building around his heart. Sir, I can make your daughter walk again. And James had frozen, because deep down, in a place he didn't dare admit existed, he wanted to believe it might be true. James hadn't said a word since they left the hospital. The car rolled through the Boston streets as silence stretched between the three of them, James, Emily, and Micah. The boy sat in the front seat now, legs tucked under him, staring out the window with a strange calmness, as if he didn't belong to the noise and chaos of the city. He hadn't asked where they were going, nor had he commented on the soft jazz playing from the car's speakers. Emily kept sneaking glances at him, whispering to her rabbit as if unsure whether he was real. James gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. He wasn't even sure why he was driving. His driver had offered, but James waved him off. Needing the control, the distraction, the boy's words still echoed in his head like a ghost he couldn't exorcise. Sir, I can make your daughter walk again. The nerve, the arrogance, the audacity. But beneath the indignation was something else. A flicker, a memory. He saw himself, small, barefoot, nose running from the cold wind on a Michigan farm. Dirty hands, empty lunchbox. He hadn't always been the man in a suit. James Harrington was born in a trailer. White skin, yes, but white skin didn't keep you warm at night or fill your stomach with food. His mother cleaned houses. His father disappeared when he was 6. What James had was luck. A local pastor had taken an interest in him, bought him books, pushed him toward scholarships, and because James was white, nobody looked twice when he showed up at school board meetings or asked to join debate club. Teachers said he was ambitious, hungry for knowledge. If his skin had been darker, would they have said the same? He remembered Marcus and Terrence, his 2 best friends growing up. Black, smart as hell, but when they asked for the same chances, they got silence. Marcus got suspended for talking back. Terrence's mom was evicted. Both ended up in juvie before 16. James never forgot. He had always told himself it was the system's fault, not his, but deep down, he knew he'd passed them in the hallway once he got the scholarship. Left them behind, promised he'd go back for them, never did. And now, decades later, this boy, Micah, stood where Marcus and Terrence had once stood. A street kid, too smart, too brave, too familiar. They arrived at James's house just after 4. The estate stood like a quiet monument to success, white stone pillars. Manicured lawn. The kind of place where silence came with a price tag. The butler opened the door, eyebrows raising slightly at Micah's appearance but wisely said nothing. Emily was wheeled inside first, giggling for the first time that day as she pointed out the stained glass ceiling. Micah followed, eyes scanning everything, not in awe, but with that same calm attention. As if the riches didn't impress him. As if he had lived in castles before. Even though James knew that was impossible. They led him to the sunroom. So what now? James asked, arms folded. You said you needed one session. Micah nodded and turned to Emily. Can I touch your legs? He asked gently. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Micah kneeled before her, placing his small fingers on her calves, pressing lightly along the muscle. He asked her a few questions, where she felt tingles, where she didn't. He didn't write anything down. He didn't close his eyes dramatically or whisper incantations. He just listened to her answers, to her muscles, to something beneath the skin. And as he worked, James found himself watching. Micah's fingers moved in patterns James couldn't place. Sometimes he tapped certain tendons. Sometimes he pressed gently on the inner arch of Emily's feet. Occasionally, Emily winced, not in pain, but like a tickle she hadn't expected. Micah would smile and say, "That's good. That means the gate's still open." James had no idea what that meant. Gate? Then he remembered something else. Another memory. One that haunted him. He was 11, visiting his aunt in Detroit. They had walked past an alley where a homeless man had been shaking with seizures. Everyone crossed the street, but a woman had run to him, dark-skinned, dreadlocked, wearing blue scrubs, and placed her fingers behind his neck, on his temples, muttering quietly. Within seconds, the man's shaking had slowed. The crowd gasped. Some called her a witch. Others clapped. That woman had looked a lot like Micah. Suddenly, James spoke. "Your mother, you said she helped people?" Micah nodded without looking up. "She worked at Lowell Psychiatric Hospital. Until it closed. Then she started helping street folks. No money, no credentials, just hands and prayers." "What happened to her?" "She got hit by a drunk driver." Micah replied, voice flat. "Right outside the shelter." James swallowed. "How long ago?" 2 years. I was 10. There was no tremble in his voice. No pity. Just fact. James felt something twist inside him. He could picture it. The kind of grief you didn't get to pause for. The kind that aged a child overnight. "She taught you all this?" "Not everything, but enough." "And people believe it?" "They don't have to," Micah said. "They just have to feel better." James scoffed quietly. "Let me guess. You lay hands on junkies and say magic words?" Micah finally looked up. "I press places they forgot existed. And sometimes their pain goes away. Sometimes they walk straighter. Sometimes they sleep again. That's all." James wanted to call it nonsense. Pseudoscience. Street parlor tricks. But then Emily twitched. Just a little. Her left leg. A spasm. No more than an inch, but it moved. James jumped. "What was that?" Emily gasped, eyes wide. I felt that." Micah smiled and continued. James felt the ground beneath his certainty begin to shift. He stared at Micah, this barefoot boy in a hoodie, called a beggar by security guards. And yet now, in his marble-floored home, with all the money and medicine in the world, it was this boy who had given his daughter something no one else could. A spark. He stepped out of the room, heart pounding. He didn't want Emily to see his face. He wasn't sure what expression he wore, shock, maybe, or fear. He walked to his study, closed the door, and leaned against the wall. He remembered Marcus again. Marcus had wanted to be a doctor, always carried a toy stethoscope. He remembered the night they were caught climbing over the fence of the local pool. Marcus got cuffed. James was driven home with a warning. Wrong place, wrong color. His mom had whispered that night, holding his face in her hands. "You got lucky. Don't forget who didn't." He hadn't. Not really. And now here was Micah. A second chance. Or maybe a ghost. Back in the sunroom, the session ended. Emily looked brighter, still in her chair. But cheeks pinker, eyes alert. She kept wiggling her toes like it was a game. "It feels like bubbles," she said, giggling. Micah laughed. "That's the nerves waking up." James returned, clearing his throat. "She's different," he said quietly. Micah didn't respond. James hesitated. "Can you come again?" Micah shrugged. "I told you. One session." James's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? You said I said if nothing happens. You won't see me again. Micah corrected. But something happened. James blinked. Then, I'll come. But not for free. James reached into his wallet instantly, pulling out a thick wad of bills. Name your price. Micah shook his head. Not money. James frowned. Then what? The boy looked him dead in the eye. You have people like me working for you. Cleaning your house. Driving your car. Pouring your coffee. And most of the time, you don't see us. I want you to see. I want you to come with me. See where I live. See what happens to kids like me. Then I'll come back. James felt his defenses rise. This is blackmail, he muttered. No, Micah said softly. This is payment. And once again, James froze, because he knew what the boy was really saying. Come see the world you left behind. The world you pretended to forget. James looked at Emily, who was still smiling, then back at the boy. And slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. Tomorrow, James said. Micah stood, gave a small bow of his head, and walked toward the door. And James couldn't help but think. The boy walked like someone who had nothing to lose, but carried the dignity of someone who had already won. Emily's cries echoed through the Harrington estate like breaking glass. James rushed into her room, heart pounding. She was sitting up in bed, fists clenched around the rabbit he'd bought her 2 years ago. Tears streamed down her face, and her tiny chest rose and fell in panicked bursts. Emily, Emily, it's okay, James whispered, rushing to her side. It's just a dream, baby, just a dream. No, it wasn't, she wailed, gripping his sleeve. I dreamed I was running again. Daddy, in the grass, with no chair. You were chasing me, and Mommy was laughing. And then I woke up, and I couldn't feel anything again. James's throat tightened. Emily's voice broke as she whispered, do you think it'll ever happen again? Daddy? He reached out, brushing her hair from her damp forehead. I don't know, sweetheart. Do you believe in miracles? She asked suddenly. The question hit him like a punch to the ribs. He opened his mouth, closed it. She was staring up at him with those wide, pleading eyes, the ones that used to light up when he walked in the room. Now, they searched him for something he didn't know if he still had, faith. He swallowed hard. I want to, he said finally. I really do. That night, James couldn't sleep. He sat in his study long after the clocks had stopped chiming. The fire was out, the windows black mirrors. He kept replaying her words. Do you believe in miracles? And then another voice returned, smaller, sharper. Sir, I can make your daughter walk again. Micah. James hadn't seen the boy in days. He'd let the matter drop after that strange offer to visit his world. The idea had made his skin crawl. What did some homeless 12-year-old know about miracles? About healing? That boy wasn't a doctor. He didn't have a degree. He didn't even have shoes half the time. But Emily, that spark in her eye hadn't come from months of physical therapy. It had come after 5 minutes with Micah. James stood abruptly, grabbed his coat, ignored the clock. 2:17 a.m. He got in his car and drove. He didn't even think about it, he just went. Back to the hospital, the bus station, the alley near the Southside laundromat. He asked a few street cleaners. Bribed one of them with $100. Little black kid? Talks like he's older than God? Yeah, I seen him, the man said. Sleeps near the old library sometimes. Under the fire escape. James drove straight there. And there he was, curled up under a moth-eaten blanket, knees tucked in, back against a stone wall. His breath steamed in the cold. His shoes were off. He looked so small, and yet, something in his stillness reminded James of a monk in a monastery. James stepped closer. Micah opened his eyes before James said a word. You're late, the boy said softly, as if he'd been expecting him. James crouched, trying to steady his voice. My daughter's asking about miracles. Micah didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded. I'll come. Blank. Blank. The next day, the Harrington estate wasn't ready for Micah. He arrived just after 10, wearing a too large sweatshirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a plastic bag slung over one shoulder. The bag sagged with glass vials, twine, and folded cloths. It wasn't medicine. It was ritual. The guard at the gate didn't even let him pass the intercom. James had to personally walk to the entrance after his assistant called. Panicked. Sir, there's a boy at the gate. A very dirty boy. When James arrived, The guards looked ready to wrestle Micah back onto the street. "What is the meaning of this?" his butler hissed, glancing around nervously. James didn't answer. He stepped forward, looked Micah up and down, and said, "Come in." The guards looked stunned. "Sir, we don't usually allow." I said let him in. Micah didn't flinch. He simply walked forward, nodding politely to the guards as if entering a palace he'd already visited in a dream. Inside, the house was pristine. Polished floors, quiet lighting, whispering staff. Every servant watched the boy pass like he was a wildfire they couldn't contain. The housekeeper pulled James aside. "Sir, with all due respect. He's tracking in filth. The staff are uneasy." "Then tell them to get over it," James said sharply. "He's here to work with my daughter." Micah said nothing. He didn't need to. James led him up to the sunroom. Emily lit up the moment she saw him. "You came back," she squealed. "I dreamed about you." "I know," Micah said, setting his bag down. "I heard you." James raised an eyebrow. "Just a feeling," Micah added, as if that explained everything. He pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he unrolled tiny pins, hand-carved, bent at odd angles, clearly handmade. They shimmered faintly in the light, and James couldn't tell if they were crude or ancient. "You're not putting those in her," James said immediately. Micah didn't look up. "Then you're wasting both our time." Emily was already holding out her arm. "I'd trust him, Daddy." James clenched his jaw, looked at the boy, then at his daughter, and then he stepped back. "Fine, but I stay." Micah nodded. "Of course. Blank. Underscore, blank." The session began. Micah didn't speak much. He asked Emily about her favorite stories, her happiest memories, her most colorful dreams. As she answered, he worked, not with drugs or machines, but with rhythm. He lit a small incense stick, waved it gently like a conductor's baton, then set it aside. He pressed her temples, kneaded behind her knees, tapped her spine softly like it held secrets. He used pressure points and deep breathing. He whispered affirmations. He told her to imagine light growing in her toes like tiny seeds. James watched, skeptical but strangely hypnotized. And then something happened. Emily laughed. Not a polite giggle, a deep, full laugh that shook her shoulders. "What is it?" James asked, stepping forward. "It tickles," she said, pointing to her thigh. "I feel it, Daddy. I feel it." Micah nodded, not surprised. He placed 2 fingers behind her ear and another on her ankle. James fell into the nearest chair. It didn't make sense, but it was working. After the session, Emily didn't want him to leave. "Will you come tomorrow?" she begged. Micah smiled. "If your dad agrees." James hesitated, looked at the boy, then nodded. "Same time. Blank. Underscore, blank." By the 3rd session, Emily moved her toes deliberately. By the 4th, she could wiggle both legs without help. By the 5th, she stood, shaky, holding the rails but stood. James couldn't believe it. He had spent over $600 in therapy clinics, consulted the best neurologists, read journals, flew to Switzerland, paid for cutting-edge tech. And here was a barefoot black kid from the street, using pins and stories, doing what medicine could not. It wasn't just Emily who was changing. James began noticing other things. He saw how the servants watched Micah, some with curiosity, some with fear, but more with shame, as if unsure how to reconcile his rags with his presence. He overheard the maid whisper, "That boy's hands glow. I swear it." He caught the gardener standing at the door after a session, hat in hand, asking, "Think he could look at my hip?" Micah agreed, every time. No charge, no judgment. One evening, James offered him a bed in the guest wing. Micah shook his head. "My place is out there." "In the cold?" Micah smiled. "Not as cold as in here." James didn't know what to say. Later that night, he stood by Emily's door, listening to her laugh, a sound he hadn't heard in months. He watched her play cards with Micah, who told her a story about his mother, how she used to hum gospel songs and rub honey behind his ears when he was sick. "Why honey?" Emily asked. "To remind me life's still sweet," Micah replied. James felt a lump form in his throat. He stepped away, down the hall, hands trembling. He had let doctors poke and prod his daughter. He had doubted, judged, feared, but now, he was beginning to believe. Not just in Micah, but in something far scarier. Change. Emily's toes curled, slowly, like petals folding at dusk. James saw it with his own eyes. It wasn't a twitch or a reflex. It was deliberate. Her brows furrowed, her lips pressed tight, and the toes moved. He exhaled sharply. His hands were trembling. "Did you?" Emily nodded, her voice quiet and odd. "I felt them first. Then I moved them. Daddy, I moved them." He turned toward Micah, who just gave a small nod and returned to winding a band of cloth around her calf. It felt like a miracle. But the next morning, the doctor's voice was clinical. "Cold. Spontaneous neurological remission isn't unheard of, Mr. Harrington," Dr. Patel said, flipping through Emily's charts. "We see it in about 1.3% of long-term pediatric paralysis cases." James frowned. "You think this is random?" "I'm saying it happens. Rarely. But it does. And it tends to occur independent of external intervention, especially non-medical ones." "You're referring to Micah." Dr. Patel shrugged. "Mr. Harrington, you're a rational man. Would you credit a street kid with healing something 10 licensed specialists couldn't?" James didn't answer. He looked at the chart. Then out the window. Emily was in the sunroom again, smiling as Micah arranged pine cones on her lap, part of some balance game he'd made up. She laughed as one rolled off and he caught it dramatically. James wanted to believe, but something inside still clenched. Blank. Underscore. Blank. It began small. A flicker. A whisper in the kitchen from the housekeeper. "It's unnatural what he does." Then the cook saw him muttering under his breath. Like a spell. Then the driver. "Folks are talking, sir, saying you've lost your mind." James tried to ignore it. Tried to focus on Emily. But then came the news crew. They parked across the street. Zoom lenses aimed at the Harrington estate. No logos. No knocking. Just silent, hungry eyes. James was livid. How the hell did they find out? His assistant glanced down. "Sir, I think it came from within." She pulled up a TikTok video. It had over 2 million views. A shaky, vertical shot showed Micah leaning over Emily, whispering gently. Her leg spasmed, then moved. The caption read, "Billionaire hires beggar boy to heal paralyzed daughter, and it works?" Hashtags. Hashtag miracle kid, hashtag crazy billionaire, hashtag black boy magic. James nearly crushed the phone. "WHO posted this?" "Anonymous account," she said, "but some of the staff think it was Maria, the maid. She's been recording things." "Fire her." "Already did. But the damage was done." By nightfall, YouTube was crawling with reaction videos. Some praising James, some mocking him. The guy's lost his mind. This is child abuse. Letting a homeless kid treat his daughter? He's exploiting that black boy for clout. No, he's being conned. James turned off the TV. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The next day, a letter arrived. Thick, cream-colored paper. Gold trim. Hand-delivered. From the Neighborhood Preservation Committee. James opened it at the breakfast table. "Dear Mr. Harrington, we write as concerned members of the Boston Garden District. Your recent decisions regarding your daughter's care, and your choice to house and employ an unlicensed, unsupervised individual, have caused considerable alarm. While we respect your privacy, your actions affect our community's image, safety, and values. We therefore respectfully request that you." He stopped reading. His knuckles went white. At the bottom were the names of 15 neighbors. CEOs, senators, socialites, people whose handshakes he'd once chased. Now, they were demanding he evict a child. Blank. Underscore. Blank. That evening, James stood on the patio, drink in hand, watching the sun disappear behind his manicured lawn. Micah joined him, silent as always. "They want me to kick you out," James said without turning. Micah didn't flinch. "I figured. They think you're dangerous, that I'm being foolish." Micah looked at the glass in James's hand. "And what do you think?" James hesitated. I don't know anymore." Micah nodded slowly. "Fear makes people say things they don't mean. But they do mean it. They think they mean it. But what they're really afraid of is being wrong." James looked at him now. Really looked. "You talk like someone 4 times your age." "I feel like someone 4 times my age." There was silence. Then Micah said, "You're not the first man to doubt me, Mr. Harrington." James turned away. "You can't blame me. I don't. I want to believe this isn't luck. Or madness. I want to believe in what you're doing. But part of me is scared. Not for my daughter, but for me. If this is real, Then what does that make everything else? Micah smiled softly. It makes it worth rethinking. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The backlash escalated. The Homeowners Association filed a formal complaint. A petition went online. Protect Boston's historic neighborhoods. Stop street healers. Someone spray-painted, "Fraud," on James's gate. A man in a Tesla shouted, "Go back to the hood," as Micah walked to the house one morning. Emily saw it all. And she was changing, too. "Why are people being so mean to Micah?" she asked one afternoon. James knelt beside her. "Because they don't understand him. But he's helping me. Doesn't that matter?" James swallowed. "It should. But grown-ups don't always see what's right in front of them." Emily gripped his hand. "Please don't send him away." "Daddy. I won't," he promised. Voice breaking. "I won't. Blank. Underscore. Blank." But even James had limits. When the state medical board sent a letter asking for a formal statement about unauthorized pediatric treatment by a non-certified minor, he panicked. His legal team begged him to cut ties. Threats of lawsuits loomed. "You could lose custody, James," his lawyer said. "Or worse, they'll come for your assets. Your reputation." He sat in his study that night, staring at the contract they drafted, a cease and desist for Micah. For his own safety, all he had to do was sign. He didn't. Instead, he walked to the sunroom. Emily was sleeping. Micah sat in the corner, folding cloths, humming something low and slow, an old blues lullaby. Maybe. James stood in the doorway, heart thudding. He saw his daughter's face, soft, peaceful, alive, and he knew he would burn the whole world down before taking this away from her. From himself. 6 weeks. That's how long Micah had been with them. 6 weeks of quiet mornings filled with humming, incense, soft chants, and strange stretches Emily never complained about. 6 weeks of James watching, waiting, wavering. Then, it happened. It started with a toe. Then a flex. Then, a step. 1 foot forward. The other followed, slow, trembling, like walking on a tightrope made of fire and hope. James was frozen. His jaw trembled. His hand reached instinctively toward the security camera mounted above the fireplace. It caught it all. Emily, standing. Emily, crying. Emily, walking, toward her father with arms outstretched. And then, in what felt like the last frame of a forgotten film reel, Emily whispered, "Daddy, I'm walking." James collapsed to his knees, his arms catching her like a prayer. The room was filled with a swelling, wordless sound, her laughter. His gasps, the wind outside suddenly gentle. The world, for a moment, was perfect. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The video leaked within hours. This time, James didn't stop it. The footage swept the internet like a wildfire ignited in dry brush. CNN, BBC, Fox, TikTok. Headlines read, "The girl who walked again. Black beggar or miracle healer? Boston billionaire's leap of faith pays off." Everyone had a take. Doctors scrambled to give interviews. The original physical therapists claimed their methods laid the foundation. But no one could deny the truth. Emily was walking. And Micah? He became a myth. A modern messiah in torn sneakers. An enigma. And then, suddenly, a target. Blank. Underscore. Blank. It happened in the alley behind the grocery store. Micah had gone out alone. He never liked drawing attention when shopping for herbs. They followed him. 4 of them, white, early 20s, local boys raised on arrogance and entitlement. "You that magic Negro, huh?" one of them sneered. Micah turned, slowly. "I don't want trouble." "Then you shouldn't be lying to white folks." "Beggar boy." One swung first, a fist to the ribs. Another threw a rock. Micah tried to run but stumbled. Kicks landed, hard. A final blow cracked against his temple. They ran when sirens neared. Micah lay crumpled by a dumpster. Blood seeping into the pavement. Blank. Underscore. Blank. James heard the news at home. "Micah's been attacked," his assistant said. Pale as ash. "They found him unconscious near Roosevelt Market. He's in critical condition." Emily screamed. James dropped his glass. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The hospital was a blur of white lights and blood-stained gauze. Micah lay hooked to tubes, his body too still. James stood outside the glass, fists clenched. Reporters had already gathered outside. Emily appeared in the hallway, not in her chair. Not carried. She was walking. Her steps were shaky, her breath ragged, but she walked straight into Micah's room. No one stopped her. She climbed onto the bed beside him, tiny hand resting over his. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Wake up," she whispered. "You can't leave now. Not when I finally get to run with you." James watched it all. His heart broke and healed all at once. Blank. Underscore. Blank. That night, he called a press conference. The media swarmed the gates. He stood on his front steps with Emily by his side, one hand on her shoulder. He didn't use a podium. No notes. Just his voice. 6 weeks ago, I didn't believe in miracles. I believed in control, in numbers, in power. I believed that because I was white and rich, I understood the world, but I was wrong. A 12-year-old black boy named Micah showed me I knew nothing. That healing doesn't come from institutions, it comes from belief. From love, from people who see what others overlook. He looked into the cameras now, fire in his eyes. And tonight, I say this. Micah will never sleep on concrete again. He will never be hungry again, or cold, or forgotten. His voice cracked. I'm bringing him home, our home, and I will pay for his education, his future, for whatever dream he wants to chase. And if anyone has a problem with that, he stepped forward. You can take it up with my daughter. She's standing here because of him. Emily lifted her chin, eyes locked with the flashing lights. She didn't need to say anything. She was the proof. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The backlash was loud. Some accused James of using Micah for publicity. Others claimed it was staged. But none of that mattered anymore. Because Micah survived. 2 days later, he opened his eyes. And when he did, the first thing he saw was Emily sleeping in the chair beside his bed, her legs curled beneath her like any ordinary child. He smiled. A tired, aching, triumphant smile. James leaned down and whispered, "You're home now, son." 1 year later, the sun poured over the lawns of the Harrington estate, warm and golden, like a promise kept. Laughter rang across the backyard, not from a screen or a staged event, but from a little girl chasing butterflies barefoot across the grass. Emily. She ran with the wind in her hair, her legs moving freely, as if they'd never known paralysis. James sat on the porch, coffee untouched, his gaze following her every movement like a man still unsure if he was dreaming. "She's faster than me now," said a voice behind him. James turned. Micah stood there in a crisp white shirt, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a textbook tucked under one arm. Faster and louder. James chuckled. Micah grinned. "That's how healing works. It makes room for more life than we expected." James studied him, taller now, shoulders stronger, scars faint but still there. But his eyes remained the same. Gentle, focused, old in the way that only children who've suffered too much can be. "How's school? First year med is no joke," Micah said. "But I like it, especially neurology. I think that's what I want to do." James raised an eyebrow. "Not mystic acupuncture?" Micah laughed. "That too. Blank. Underscore. Blank." Boston was colder now, but the hearts in the city were a little warmer. Because things had changed. It started small, a school district inviting Micah to speak. Then came the interviews, the scholarships, the outreach programs. People began to ask questions they never had before. What if healing wasn't only in hospitals? What if poverty didn't mean ignorance? What if black boys weren't threats, but treasures waiting to be discovered? Blank. Underscore. Blank. 6 months ago, James had done something no one expected. He sold his company. The tech empire that made him a billionaire? Gone. Instead, he poured the proceeds into something new, something no one thought a man like him would ever build. A therapy and healing center in the heart of the city. Its name stood tall in soft blue letters across the entrance. Micah's Hope. Inside, no one wore suits or lab coats unless they wanted to. There were therapy dogs, music, sunlight. Children of every color and class came through its doors, with walkers, crutches, silence in their eyes, and they left different. Not always cured, but seen, heard, loved, and sometimes, just sometimes, they walked out with more than they came in. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The media tried to keep up. The headlines were now full of words like, "Healing Revolution in Boston. Former Billionaire's Center changes therapy forever." From beggar to beacon, Micah's journey continues. A documentary was in production. Emily narrated part of it herself. "My name is Emily Harrington," she said in the trailer. "I used to believe in fairy tales. Then I met Micah, and found something even better, truth. Blank. Underscore, blank. James, for once, didn't care about the noise. His days were simpler now. Every morning, he walked to the center. Not driven, walked. He shook hands with every patient. Read stories to kids in wheelchairs. Took notes during staff meetings. Though he wasn't staff. Micah sometimes teased him. You're the boss. You can skip meetings. James always answered the same. Not if I want to learn something. Because that's what James had realized. The richest man in the city had only begun to live when he stopped trying to be in charge. Blank. Underscore, blank. One chilly afternoon, as autumn leaves danced in the courtyard, James found Emily sitting beside Micah in the garden. She was teaching him to braid friendship bracelets to distress. She said, "Since med school is frying your brain." Micah was terrible at it. But he kept trying. James didn't say anything. He just watched them. And then, like every grateful man eventually does, he looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Blank. Underscore, blank. Later that week, a newscast closed with a story that aired nationwide. A soft-spoken reporter stood in front of the bright glass doors of Micah's Hope. Behind her, a mural stretched across the wall, a young black boy with outstretched arms. Surrounded by swirling colors and floating hands reaching toward him. She looked into the camera and said, "In a world often divided by fear, one story stands out. From a beggar boy on the streets of Boston to the healer of hundreds, Micah Johnson's journey reminds us all that miracles don't always wear white coats. Sometimes, they wear torn shoes and carry broken hearts, but they leave trails of hope behind them. This is not just a story of healing limbs. It's a story of healing hearts." Blank. Underscore, blank. And in the quiet that followed, Micah stood in his dorm room, watching the broadcast with tears in his eyes. Emily texted him a single heart emoji. James didn't text. He just showed up the next morning with breakfast. The world hadn't changed entirely. But it was starting to. And it all began with one boy who looked up and said, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again. Thank you for listening. May we all learn to see beyond what divides us, and believe in the miracles that walk among us every day." Until next time, take care, and keep your heart open.